Welcome to the Women Who Change the World podcast, the place where everyday women world changers share their stories to inspire, challenge, and equip you to change your world.
Are you stuck in your office spinning your wheels? Is it time for you to get away from your business so you can focus on the business? Maybe a retreat. I'm Katie Horner of the For Your Success podcast, and though my husband and I started out in full-time ministry, living well below the poverty line, our six-figure business now gives us ministry opportunities that far outweigh the ones we had in full-time ministry. Join me and my husband Tap on April 30th at the Get Out of the Boat Christian Business Virtual Retreat to recharge your batteries, and let us show you how fun it can be to walk out your faith in your business with joy and confidence, because doing the business that God created you to do can be your best worship. The Get Out of the Boat Christian Business Retreat is April 30th from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m., and you can attend from anywhere online. We can't wait to see you there. You can get all the info and register for your ticket right now at getoutoftheboat.com.
Hi, everybody. I am so glad you're here. Welcome to Women Who Change the World. I'm talking to you, the everyday women world changer. We are here with Brenda Mason Parmalee, and she is going to help you get your house from insane crazy. Don't walk in mine. Don't be judging. Don't be walking in mine. There are 9 people and 1,800 square feet in this house and 2 dogs. But she is here to help you, and she's most certainly here to help me to get out of my chaos and into an oasis that I don't want to leave. Okay, maybe that's not quite true. I do want to leave. There are 9 people in this house. If you want to stay, you can stay. I'm leaving. So how are
it's going
you?
to be an oasis. But it's going to be an oasis, Samantha.
Right. So how are you, Brenda?
I am wonderful. Thank you for having me here and with your audience.
So I know a lot of your story. I have your book. I have your course.
Thank you.
My house is still kind of crazy, but I'm working on it, one room at a time, and I'm getting there. But explain to these women what you do.
So I actually have come along to serve the people who have the desire to rid their home of their clutter, but yet they're stuck in the overwhelm of the process. And I do that by a proprietary process that I created because I had to do that. And I did it successfully. And other people have said, can you show me how to do it? And I wanted to do it in the 31 days to get it done like you did. So I thought, how in the world can I do that for people in more than like going one-on-one? I could maybe help 9 people a year, if that. And if they got it all done in the 31 days, then I'd be back to back. So I actually put it into a course form so people go through it at their leisure, or they can go through it with me. And then somebody saw that and said, you need to put this in a book. So it is the course like you have, but it's in a book. And I go all over speaking and helping people create their oasis. I call it creating your oasis, actually, but it's clutter free by the time we're done. And so there's a little bit more behind that of how it got started. I'll be happy to share that if you'd like me to, but that's basically what I do, is I help people go from chaos to sanctuary of their own oasis and call it home.
So you started off with a 3,100 square foot home. How would you, looking now back at your home, how would you describe your home that you lived in 3,100 square feet?
You know, it's easy for me to tell you I was organized, but I had closed doors of rooms just filled with chaos and piles. And I was always trying to get organized, and everybody who knew me thought I was organized. And I was organized. You know, I knew I had all this stuff, and I had thousands and hundreds of thousands of pieces of things, but I couldn't always just lay my hand on it when I needed to. And moving from one house to another, I just box it all up and take it with me. And I was just I spent a lot of free time in my children's lives trying to get organized. And what I really needed to do, which I finally found out toward the end of my time there, where I was in Utah with that, was to I'm sorry, you're going to have to edit this here because the dog's drinking water loud. So, in answer to your question, I spent a lot of wasted time trying to get organized when what I really needed to do was to get decluttered, keeping what I really wanted to be surrounded by and what I really used and needed or loved, and then organize that up so that I always came home to an oasis.
So you talked about moving. How often did you move before you settled there and then had to leave it?
Yeah. So I'm going to take you back just a little bit to how I had so many things. I'm going to give you way back. Um, I was an only child and I knew my great grandparents. I knew my grandparents. I still have my parents. I got married, had my own children, and I took really good care of my things. And I always had some kind of an emotional, I know the stories to things and the emotions to things. And because I took such good care of my things, as people passed away, I got everything and I wanted to keep it because I had fond memories and I just said all this stuff. And so then in 1982, I got married and found myself heading overseas. 5 weeks later, we were not military, but we were associated with the military. And so I put everything in storage. But then when I was overseas, in answer to your question, about every 2.5 years, and I'd pretty much lived in one spot my whole life. I wasn't used to moving. I wasn't a military background. Even though we were associated with the military, they didn't move us. So we had just got married, put what we had in storage. And so then I found myself overseas, and there were beautiful things and things to experience. And so, and just being newly married, we would buy things. We had to, I was creating our first home. But then all of a sudden, they sent us to Texas. And so we moved back and we sent back more trinket and kit. I always had to keep my kitchen things. I was a chef wannabe. But furniture, that type of thing, we didn't really move back. But then I found myself we bought our first house together here in the States. And then I brought all the things that we'd had in storage from our move, plus all the new things that we brought in. So my whole point is in here, up until the year 2000, we moved about every 3 years. And I would pack everything up and take it with us. And we'd be in a new place or a new experience. And, I'd have to get more stuff. And then the children came along and they had their things and I had things for them that I'd kept all those years. And so it kind of goes to show how, especially in America, we tend to go bigger and bigger. And I had always prided myself that I'd never had a storage unit after that first. And actually, I'd stored things that we'd left behind. I'd stored in a friend of my parents' basement. So I hadn't put anything into storage, and we always moved everything. But later in life, I always prided myself that I'd never gotten a storage unit. But my house was a storage unit, and I just hadn't realized it. And every time we moved, the moves got more expensive, or friends, there weren't as many people that wanted to help because they knew how much stuff we had and how heavy it was. And every time we moved, I always seemed to go to a bigger house, either a larger mortgage when I was married. Once I got pink slipped in 2004 or 5-ish, which is the divorce. We were on Salt Lake City, which is where all this started really coming to a head. Then I was constantly renting a bigger house. Almost my entire income was going to pay rent for somebody else. And somebody said, why don't you just get a smaller place? I'm like, what would I do with all my stuff? So at 54 and becoming an empty nester, I made some decisions, and that's how all this came about. So I moved about every 3 years, but I always took everything with me.
So in the packing up of all the stuff and moving the stuff, because let's see, I've been married 26 years.
Mm-hmm.
We've lived in this house the longest. 8 years we've lived in this house.
Yes.
Other than that, we've lived 5 years or less in everywhere. And in the first 20 years of my marriage, I'd moved 17 times.
Yep. Wow.
And as a homeschooling mom, with all of those books, because we had a tendency not to return library books on time. So I was tired of paying fees. I just bought books. It's very hard. And I would declutter before a move, like majorly declutter, but there was still so much stuff. And the emotions, it's the physical heaviness, but there's an emotional heaviness. So when you decided to downsize from your 3,100 square foot home to what you're living in now, which is 310 square feet, right?
Yes. Yes. And
How
I
did
did
your
it in 31 days.
emotions play into that? Because you said you did it in 31 days. You had to let go of stuff fast.
I
And there's
did.
a lot of
I did have
emotion
to
in
do
it.
that.
So how did you deal with the emotions?
You know, it's interesting because my youngest daughter had said, Mom, when we talked about what I was going to do, because she was getting ready to go to college. So I was going to be an empty nester and I need to go from Salt Lake City, Utah, back to Virginia, where I've been living almost 6 years now in the same little space. But she had said, great, sounds like a great plan, Mom, but everything in this house is a heartstring to you. I don't see how you're going to be able to do it, basically, is what she said. So in a way, that was a challenge. For me, there was I'm going to get to your answer in a second. There's frugality to me. I knew when we moved out there the first time in 2000, it cost over $20,000. And my husband at the time's company paid for it. They came in, they packed it all up, and they just took everything with us, even the trash cans. I mean, hear stories of how the trash gets packed up. It's true, it does. So, because I always had only like 2 weeks notice to move. I never had a plan thing where I could go through everything, and two young daughters at the time. So anyhow, she's getting ready to go. And but it would cost me almost $30,000 back. One, I didn't have it. I'd given all my alimony back earlier, and I just didn't have the money. And even if I did, I wouldn't want to spend it on that. And then I looked into pods and other places to move it back for me. This is not the answer to your question, but I feel like the backstory helps a little bit. So I looked at moving the items back with me, and it was still, even doing a pod or where they move it across the country for you, it was going to cost me a minimum of $3,500 to $5,000. But then once I got back here, you had to empty them. You can't keep it, or you had to rent. They had an ongoing payment, and I thought, I just didn't have the money at the time to do it. I had a budget of $700 a month. That's what I lived on until very recently, $713.92. So I was very proud of myself living in those means. I didn't have any debt, but I just wasn't going to go into debt to get my stuff back. And even if I could put it in the town, it takes an hour for me to drive to where I need to get to the back and forth. So one, it was a frugal move for me. In answer to your question, I don't know how. I did a lot of praying during that time, to be totally honest. And I knew that I was going to move from there to here, and I bought a 5x8 cargo trailer. So whatever I was going to bring back had to fit in that 5x8 cargo trailer. I think if I hadn't had a fast time to have to do it in, I don't know if I would have done it. But you deal with all your physical clutter is almost like having heavy chains about you. So I had emotional chains to deal with. And I just, so in going back, I was 54 at the time. This is back in 2015. So I'm 60 now, yes, but 2015. But all those times I'd moved, and all through my children's lives, my oldest was 23 at the time. My youngest was 18, getting ready to graduate from high school. But I had always been trying to, like I said earlier, I'd always been trying to get organized and to declutter. So for 33 years, I'd been doing it, but yet I always had clutter. So part of what I look at now is the foundational way that I figured out how to do it was you have to deal with your emotions and how you look at your things and make your own decisions. And Marie Kondo had come out at the time, and I had read her book. Wasn't working for me, but I think that kind of helped get it started. So I came up, and I had read all through the years, Donna, so I'd read everybody's books on getting decluttered, getting organized. So I had a huge reading background from that 33 years, and nothing actually really worked. So in doing that 31 years, or the 33 years of all that, and I'd given a ton of stuff away. And I can say that I probably was quite downsized, but I would turn around, I'd continue to bring more stuff back in. And I had looked at the idea at one point of if you brought one thing in, you had to give one or two things away, or the minimalist way of where you bring one thing in, you get rid of one thing, the next day two, the next day four, and you're tripling it. It would have taken me almost 82 years to get rid of everything. And at that point, I was 54, and I wanted to live my life finally. And I did not want to spend the rest of my life decluttering because I'd already been doing it. It just didn't work. So so I don't know if that really answered your question, but I knew I had the 31 days. I had a size, I had a vision. That's what I'm going to tell you. I'm just going to tell you my foundational stuff. Would you like to ask me a question? Because I think I've gotten way far off, but I'm getting into it now and I want to tell you guys how to do it.
No, because my next question was talking about your clutter code and why it works. So you keep going. I'm listening. I'm learning.
Okay.
I'm taking
So,
notes.
all right. Well, thanks. So what I need to tell you is I had tried almost every way. And if we don't, and you asked me about emotions, and if we don't deal, a lot of our clutter, there's emotions in there that have that weigh on us. And that's why, like, if somebody's coming over for dinner and I've had done this, my whole house looked really organized, and it was, but I had one room upstairs. I called it my office. Technically it was my catch-all, hide the clutter, because if somebody was coming over office and I had coming over for dinner or to stop by and I had piles on my kitchen cabinets or whatever, I'd run around, I'd grab everything up. I walked down the hallway, I'd open that door, I'd put that stuff in on the floor or wherever I could find to put it, and I'd close the door, and all of a sudden I was organized. But I got to tell you, walking it down and shuffling your stuff on one room to another or one box to another is not being decluttered. And that would still weigh on me. And it also weighed on me financially because, like I mentioned earlier, I couldn't go to a smaller place because what would I do with all my stuff? You've heard me talk about that. And then there's expenses in the move and utilities. And there's a huge price you pay on your life, I believe. And the reason I say that is I'll fast forward. After I did this, I was at a tiny house festival because I'm living in that 310 square feet. I'm going to go back to how I did it. But when I was standing there, answering the emotional part, when I was standing at this festival, it was the very first one they had, like a big expo, and people were all lined up and so excited and looking at these tiny houses, the models. And I think even if you go to a model home, even if it's a 10,000 square foot model home, or the magazines we look through, and everything just looks beautiful and there's not a lot of piles. And I think what we see is a simpler life. Oh, you want to buy this home and look at all the spaciousness. But the reality is when you get all your stuff in there and your habits, and, if you have empty space, even in a big house, especially in a bigger house, we're programmed that we have to fill every space. And there's a thing on us. If we're successful, we'll keep up with the Joneses. If they get something brand new, we have to get two more because we think we want it better. But and we're bombarded. The next shiny thing, as soon as something dulls, we have to go get it. Not everybody falls to this. And I did for years. So, in backing up a little bit, I had a vision of not spending a lot of money, but I did. My home was like 310 square feet, and I knew what I was moving back to in Virginia. I was looking at a tiny house. I couldn't get legality answers, but there was a bus. It's like a Greyhound bus, and it had already been converted out. It was actually sitting on my property. And that was my decision. I was going to go back and live mostly off grid, a simple lifestyle. And for those of you who are thinking, I would never do that, the principle applies regardless of the size of your home, your lifestyle, and where you want to go. And that's very important. This was just my decision, may not be yours, totally cool. But I had my vision. I was going to go back and live in this bus, 310 square feet. I was fortunate enough to know how the storage was set up on it and how it was. It was already done. I didn't have to complete it. So in my mind, I knew I couldn't hardly take anything back with me. But yeah, I had my great grandmother's stuff and my grandfather. I just had everything. So I was kind of thinking, what in the world did I do? I noticed at work, May 1st of 2015, I had to declutter. And I went into my office first. That is not true. I went into my office first and I looked around and I thought, this is an impossible job. And I was paralyzed. That's why I talk about knowing the pain that people feel when they want to get organized, they want to get decluttered. But you just shut down. You don't know where to begin. How am I going to do this? What am I going to do with this stuff? So my point is, I get it. And I knew that was coming. So I had a vision. You have your vision of what you want your oasis to be, what it feels like. If you don't know what it's going to look like, I would not spend 2 years making a vision board, because that's honestly a form of procrastination. Vision boards are good, but you do not want to spend forever figuring out what you want it to look like when you know you got to declutter. But so get a quick vision, mission statement, whatever, what you want to look like, because that's a small light at the end of the tunnel. But as you start letting things go or deciding what you're going to keep, if you get stuck, sometimes that light's a little brighter then because you're getting closer to it, and it keeps you going. And then I have a thing called the resources. There'll be a link in at the down in the podcast where you can get your free resource rehoming tracker that kind of helps you with that. And anyhow, so that's just free, but you can just figure that outside a resource tracker. I decided with all this stuff in such a quick move, and I knew I couldn't take it, and I didn't have my family here to go dump it on or to give things to people, whether they wanted it or not. But you have to figure out where you're going to rehome your items to. So I had, there were things that I gifted, there were women's shelters, there were consignment shops, there were various friends that I knew wanted things, and I decided I was going to have an estate sale. So you figure out all these different places and you research, and the rehoming tracker, you know what's open. You know, a lot of times at the beginning of winter, places will take winter items, but by the time you get to January, they don't want winter items. They're looking for your springtime items. So you just need to kind of know what people are accepting, what they're not, because if you're leaving, like I was, if a place wasn't going to take some of my clutter in, I would have needed to find a different place for it to go. So you've got, those are foundational things. And the biggest thing that people run into, I call them the clutter code chains. So you're asking about the clutter and the emotional part. I call them clutter code chains because they weigh heavy on you. Chains weigh heavy. If you think of A Christmas Carol, where Marley's, you know, the chains of Christmas past as they show, we have that. I was just talking about all that, you know, the emotional and on anything. So when you are getting ready to declutter, if you are aware of the um, the clutter code chains, the what if, you'll find yourself saying, I can't get rid of this. What if I can't find it one day? Or what if somebody finds out that I gave it away? You have all these what ifs that start coming up, and it will shut you down. Then you have your money. Oh, this is going to be worth something one day. You may hate it, but you know it's going to be worth something one day. So you'll spend thousands of dollars in rent to have this bigger house for a china cabinet. That's my personal one, because I couldn't take a rental property that might have been smaller one. My stuff wouldn't fit, right? But my china cabinet was almost 8 feet tall. And if a house only had an 8 foot ceiling, I wouldn't take it because my china cabinet wouldn't fit. I know it's silly, but that's where I was at before I started doing this. My china cabinet was not going to make it back to Virginia in a 5x8 cargo trailer. I did have a Suburban for overflow, but anyhow, so you have that. And then you have the heartstrings, which is what my daughter told me. Was going to have a heartstring to everything. And the heartstring clutter code, as you know, there's memories attached to it. There's love. There's a lot of ghosts that kind of come in with that. So I was aware of that, and I became aware of that standing in that one room that I was talking to you about, which I'll address a little bit more later. And then there's, I had read somewhere back in 2014 that the average, and it's more now, but the average American household has 300,000 items in it. And as I went through my process, I realized that there's only 4 types of items that you have, and this helps you in decluttering. So if you have your oasis, you know where your things are going to go. You are aware of those clutter code chains, which are addressed sometimes because you know it's going to help somebody else from day 2 of your, figuring out where things are going to go. And then if you will be honest with yourself about, do you honestly need it? Do you really use it? And do you truly love it? And I said there were 4 things. If it doesn't fit one of those 3 categories, it is empty clutter. And somebody else is most likely out there waiting for it, and you need to release it and let it go. Some things have to go to the trash. They just have to go. But there's a lot of things that you can let go of, and it's easier to let go. So I just went on a really long rampage through the things that I found and that I had to deal with in those 31 days. And I did, but I knew where I was going, the field that I wanted. I was tired of piles and papers and clutter and not being able to find things. And I wanted a place for everything. And it was going to be just me. And it was the first time I was going to have an opportunity to do this. You can do it with a husband and you can do it with children. I've helped with that people with that. I'm just giving you very fast, quick basics. But it's done. And I've helped hundreds of people now with this. And, the one lady had a couple looms, like the weaving looms, and she almost wasn't going to finish the decluttering because she might want to use it one day. Boy, we talked, and she was in part of the group that we had going at the time. And she finally found a place, a young girl who was getting into it, really wanted to do it, and doing beautiful work, but she needed a loom. And she got that loom. She could let her go. And do you know they sold their house like the next day? Within 30 days, they were sold. And now she's posting pictures in other countries of them out paddleboarding, and they're living and going, and they're living their life. But they had no concept of being able to even do one of their dreams, retire and go do this, because they had the weight of the house and all the stuff. And but the reason I tell you that you have to create your own oasis is I'm not going to tell you you can only keep 10 books and 33 pieces of clothing. You're creating. You get to decide what you're going to keep and what you're not going to keep. But if you're aware of all these other things, you know, and so what my stuff is given, and in talking with the people, let's just start tell you, I was at the Tiny House Festival, and they were all excited. And they're like, oh, I could do this and I could do that. And then they'd get this dark cloud and they'd say, but what would I do with my stuff? And I thought our stuff is what's supposed to give us this freedom and this joy and this pleasure. And yet it's the very thing that we still feel empty and chained by. So that's more my message than the decluttering, is that, you know, there are things you can do to really to truly live your life and to move forward with it. And you don't have to go tiny. You don't have to give away everything. But to me, an oasis is when you come home at the end of the day and you've got everything that you need and that you really use and that you really do love. And that's what you're surrounded by. Now, sometimes you might be mad at a spouse, but I'm saying in general, the things that you love with you, you know, that came up at one of my conferences. I just had to say that, but that is an oasis for most people. It's whatever you dream it to be, you know, and if you've got a whole bunch of fishing flies and you don't want to let go of any of them, you don't have to. But in going through, you'll find I use this all the time. I've never used this. I don't like it. I don't like the fish it attacks. I can donate that to the fishing club or whatever. Recently with COVID, different realm. One of the guys in my course up in Canada, actually, and he wanted to keep moving. He wanted to be on his bike and out there doing his thing, and but he couldn't do a yard sale because of the distancing and whatever. Things are easier now, but during the time when we were going through this, he couldn't do that, and he just put everything he would have done at a yard sale or taken. You know, even the Goodwill and Salvation Army, some of those things were closed and people needed to move or do whatever they needed to do. And they just put everything out on the front lawn and put a free sign on it. You know, we've had natural disasters. We've had, of course, COVID. We've had, you know, people that wouldn't have known how they were going to put a winter coat on their child for that year, but because people were donating the things that were still in great condition, no longer fit, or just putting them out there for free, people could do that. There's others out there waiting. So boy, I have just like not given you a breath in there. I haven't taken many either, but so I am changing the world, you know, like one household at a time. But it's also about creating your life. I got closer with the Lord. I got to tell you about being in that one room. I realized standing in that room one day, the reason I had so many, I was in a marriage the first time that, anyhow, there was a point where there was just indifference. And I know that I kept thinking, if I could do the right dinner party, if I could have the house clean just right, if I could have the right look, buy the right clothes, I would be loved again. And that's not but that was my reality at the time, and that's how I kept buying and spending all these things. I wanted somebody, and I held on to things because I wanted to show my daughters, but I held on to things because I wanted to prove that I was somebody. I wanted to show that I was worthy. I hate to say that, but you know, a lot of people live that way. And it took me going into this process, and I realized why I'd held on to so many things, you know, or if the heartstring thing, I couldn't let go of something that I never even took out of the box because I didn't like it. I couldn't use it. But what if somebody found out that I'd given it away or sold it? They'd get mad. They don't even remember giving it to me. You really have to create your life and move on with it. So a lot of people have read it and they're realizing, you know, that God's simpler life, intentional living, you know, but you know what, in there here, I love dishes. I got rid of so many dishes and cookbooks, but I kept 2 full sets of china, 12 place settings. But I loved both sets of china. One was my grandmother's and I kept it. But there were other dishes, many other dishes and cookware and stuff that I did let go of. But you can keep the things that you really want to keep. It's okay. But I think you really have to live your life.
Hey everyone, I know that we are just getting started into this episode, but I had to cut the podcast episode in half to make 2 episodes because it was just too good to edit anything out. Be on the lookout because part 2, I promise, is worth the wait.
Are you stuck in your office spinning your wheels? Is it time for you to get away from your business so you can focus on the business? Maybe a retreat. I'm Katie Horner of the For Your Success podcast, and though my husband and I started out in full-time ministry, living well below the poverty line, our 6-figure business now gives us ministry opportunities that far outweigh the ones we had in full-time ministry. Join me and my husband Tap on April 30th at the Get Out of the Boat Christian Business Virtual Retreat to recharge your batteries, and let us show you how fun it can be to walk out your faith in your business with joy and confidence, because doing the business that God created you to do can be your best worship. The Get Out of the Boat Christian Business Retreat is April 30th from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m., and you can attend from anywhere online. We can't wait to see you there. You can get all the info and register for your ticket right now at getoutoftheboat.com.